Welcome, welcome, welcome to your daily nuggets from the Lord. And you are here with moi. And as always, one is feeling jubilant. Now, I know I have been naughty, but I was determined that as it's Wellness Wednesday, I could not come out and share with you what is the topic for this week. So, without further ado, I shall get on to it. So, as you know, we've been talking for the rest of the year, we are having Wellness Wednesdays. And Wellness Wednesdays, we're talking about mental health issues and abuse and any other issue that impacts our wellness. And we'll talk about health and anything in this manner. So, over the past few weeks, we did mental health, and we're now moving on to one of the topics in abuse. One of those topics are domestic violence. Now, what does the Bible say about and how does it record things that we often find sad or even disturbing? And it isn't that the Bible doesn't say that it's there, it says it. But why? Because this is real life. And if the Bible was just depicting a fairy tale or, lovely, rosy, only then when, Jesus comes, we'll all be taken up to heaven and we all live happily ever after, that would not be real. The reality is horrible things do happen. Where is God in all of this? And that's often the question that many victims will scream. Where is God when I'm going through what I'm going through? Where is He? Why is He not hearing my cries? Why is He not helping me? Where is God in all of this? Well, God placed us in places where we have churches, church leaders, authorities, even in the workplace, your family, and they need to be held accountable because their silence is not an option. We can no longer pretend, fake that these things do not happen. It is not okay. So let's get into the words and see where this is. And I'm going to make a disclaimer from now. I would say, the second part, what I am going to talk about, if you've ever been impacted by it, I am sorry if it even lets you relive that moment. But I want you to know you are not alone and that we will go through and get through this together. So have no fear. Yes, Jerome. I am going to preach it loud because, we are forgetting that this is real and people do not want to accept that we have evil, wicked people within our mix. But we do. And so this is something that we need to address and we need to talk about. So, oh, sorry. Some reason I'm choking. Let's begin. Why am I choking? Have mercy. So, today, as I said, we're going to be looking at domestic violence and what it is. There are 9 forms of violence, and these are classed as bullying, child maltreatment, community violence, domestic and intimate partner violence, school violence, sexual abuse and sexual violence, sex trafficking, teen dating violence and prevalence. We will be looking today at domestic violence and intimate partner violence and the impact and where you can get support. So let's begin. So in 1 Samuel 25, there was a certain man in Moab who carried on his business in the region of Carmel. He was very prosperous, 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. It was sheep sharing time in Carmel, and the man's name was Nabal, which meant fool, and he was a Calebite, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and good looking. The man was brutish and mean. So this is the first time in the Bible where you start to hear that it talks about someone's character as not being very desirable. David was out in the back country and heard that Nabal was sharing his sheep and sent 10 of his young men off with these instructions. Go to Carmel and approach Nabal, greet him in my name. Peace, life, and peace to you. Peace to your household. Peace to everyone here. And I heard that it's sheep sharing time. Here's the point. When your shepherds were camped near us, we didn't take advantage of them. They didn't lose a thing all of the time that they were with us in Carmel. So ask your men, they will tell you. And of course, Nabal answers, what I'm asking is that you be generous with my men, share your feast, give whatever your heart tells you to the servants and to me, David, your son. David's young men went and delivered his message word for word to Nabal, and Nabal tore into them. Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? The country is full of runaway servants these days. Do you think I'm going to take good bread and wine and meat and freshly butchered for my sheep shearers and give it to men I've never laid eyes on? Who knows where they come from? I don't care about them. David's men got out of there and went back and told David what he had said. David said, now remember, David is a man of war. And this is one thing that people often forget. David was a man of war, and so he was off. Strap on your swords. They all strapped on their swords, David and his men, and set out, 400 of them, leaving 200 behind to guard the camp. So this is 400 men that David is now about to take to go and annihilate Nabal and his family. Meanwhile, one of the young shepherds told Nabal's wife, what had happened. David sent messengers from the back country to salute our master, but he tore into them with insults. Yet these men treated us very well. They took nothing from us and didn't take advantage of us. All the time we were in the fields, they formed a wall around us, protecting us day and night. All the time we were out tending the sheep. Do something quickly, because big trouble is ahead for our master and all of us. Nobody can talk to him. He's impossible. He's a real brute. So here again, you see his character is coming out. Abigail flew into action. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep dressed out and ready for cooking, a bushel of roasted grain, 100 raisin cakes, 200 fig cakes, and she had it all loaded on some donkeys. Then she said to her young servants, go ahead and pave the way for me. I'm right behind you. But she said nothing to her husband, Nabal. Why? So David was on his way with his men to wipe out Nabal and his family. Abigail, knowing the character of her husband, went to correct things and save them. As soon as Abigail saw David, she got off her donkey and fell on her knees at his feet, her face to the ground in homage, saying, my master, let me take the blame. Let me speak to you. Listen to what I have to say. Don't dwell on what that brute Nabal did. He acts out of the meaning of his name, Nabal, fool. Foolishness oozes from him. Oftentimes, the partner who is party to domestic violence will always try to smooth things over or take the blame for things gone wrong in the home in a way to prevent anger, shame, or embarrassment of the partner, and in the hope of not getting the backlash, as the partner will often never take responsibility if they have done something incorrect or forgotten to do something. Oftentimes, the person experiencing the domestic violence will say things like, it's my fault. I should have reminded you about such and such, or I should have done it. I'm sorry, I'll take care of it. You won't need to bother about it again. I wasn't there. When the young man my master sent arrived, I didn't see them. And now, my master, as God lives as you live, God has kept you from this avenging murder. And may your enemies, all who seek my master's harm, end up like Nabal. Now take this gift that your servant girl have brought to my master, and give it to the young men who follow in the steps of my master. Abigail stepped up and took the blame and was willing to take the brunt of David's anger instead of her husband, protecting the perpetrator, which puts her in harm's way. In this incident, it shows that people need to hold their leaders accountable, although doing so may come at the cost of personal great risk. You don't have to um, you don't have to have authority status to be called to exercise influence, but you do need courage, which fortunately is something you can receive from God at any time. Abigail's intervention also demonstrates that showing respect, even while making a pointed criticism, provides a model for challenging authority. Nabal turned a petty argument into a life threatening situation by wrapping a minor dispute in a personal insult. But Abigail resolves a life threatening crisis by dressing a major rebuke in a respectful dialogue. In what ways may God be calling you to exercise your influence to hold people in positions of higher authority accountable? How can you cultivate a godly attitude of respect along with unwavering commitment to telling the truth? What courage do you need from God to actually do it? That is a question for you. So then we go on to our second stage. And once again, I just want to say, for anyone who's experienced this at any time, please know that you are not alone and your hurt is not being downplayed. The rape of Tamar. Physical, sexual, and emotional violence in the home between two adults, usually partners, is considered domestic violence. This is also the case if a child in the home is the violent party or siblings within the family home. How do we address and deal with this form of domestic violence? So with Abigail, we assume it's more bullying and maybe emotional and financial. Here, it's actual physical and sexual. Sometime later, this happened. Absalom, David's son, had a sister who was very attractive. Her name was Tamar. Ammon, also David's son, which was David's first son, was in love with her. And Ammon was obsessed with his sister Tamar to the point of making himself sick over her. She was a virgin, so he couldn't see how he could get his hands on her. Ammon had a good friend, Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shemiah, and Jonadab was exceptionally streetwise. He said to Ammon, "Why are you moping around like this? Day after day, you're the son of the king. Tell me what's getting at you." And in a word, he said, "Tamar," said Ammon, "my brother, Absalom's sister. I'm in love with her." And, the Bible gives you the history as to where they come from. And Ammon is born of Ahanon of Jezreel, and he's the firstborn of David. And there is then Nabal's widow, because he then went to Abigail, has Absalom, and she has Tamar. So, and Absalom is one of the most handsomest of all of David's sons, and that's maybe why of Abigail's genetics, who knows? Tamar is one of the most beautiful. But Ammon was the crown prince, and and these were the sons of David, and of course Tamar was their sister. So the Ammon, the crown prince, he ignores Tamar's pleas and then overpowers her, and hurting her and humiliating her, the one he was charged to protect, and after raping her, has her thrown out onto the street. Ammon said, "Clear everyone out of the house," and then all of them cleared out. And then he said to Tamar, "Bring food into my bedroom." They all cleared out. Then he said to and then she took the nourishing dumplings she had prepared and brought them to her brother Ammon in his bedroom. But when she got ready to feed him, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me, sister." She said, "No, brother, don't hurt me. This kind of thing isn't done in Israel. Don't do this terrible thing. Where could I ever show my face? And you'll be out on the street in disgrace. Oh, please speak to the king. If that's the case, he'll let you marry me." But he wouldn't listen to her. Being much stronger than she, he raped her. Ugh, I can't even tell you how this just infuriates me. So another writer puts it this way, Alison McKinney Tim. She's a founder of the Justice Revival and is theology trained human rights lawyer and elder in a Presbyterian church. I moan prayers of lament that have no words. I struggle to wrap my heart around these stories. There is no forgetting the alarming reality of domestic violence, which has besieged so many women in the ancient world and in ours. The bell of consciousness cannot be unrung. One must move forward to confront this deeply uncomfortable truth. Unlike harmful cultural practices, we readily and perhaps rightly condemn domestic violence. You know, it's undeniably also a Western problem too. If 1 out of 4 women in the West is affected, how many are in our local communities? David sent word to Tamar, who was at home at the time. Everything has just turned upside down for this young girl, and it's just a nightmare. But let's see how her family deal with it. So no sooner had Ammon raped her than he hated her with an immense hatred. The hatred that he felt for her was greater than the love he'd even had for her. Get up, he said, and get out. Her brother Absalom said to her, sorry, I just need some water. For some reason, my throat's dry. Sorry. Oh no, brother, she said, please, this is an even worse evil than what you've just done to me. But he wouldn't listen to her. He called for his valet and said, get rid of the woman, get her out of my sight, and lock the door after her. The valet threw her out and locked the door behind her. She was wearing a long sleeve gown. That's how virgin princesses used to dress from early adolescence on. And Tamar poured ashes on her head. Then she ripped the long sleeve gown, held her head in her hands, and walked away sobbing as she went. By now, my blood is boiling. And I don't know about any of you, if you've sat and read, even when I was reading the story and I was bringing it and I was typing it, I was like, this was making me lose my mind. I was like, oh my goodness, this cannot be really what is going on and what is happening. This is just so wrong. This is wrong on every single level. I was so incensed and angered in reading this, and such emotions of like hurt and sadness, because today this is still real life for many. And then the worst part for me is the attitude of the family and the ones who should protect you. This is the same in our churches and with the leadership today. Her brother Absalom said to her, has your brother Ammon had his way with you? Now, my dear sister, let's keep it quiet. A family matter. He is after all your brother. Don't take this so hard. Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's home, bitter and desolate. How do you mean? Don't take it so hard. What? Let us not make a scene, but just keep it quiet. Maybe it will go away and you will just get over it. No, they won't. And you're hiding that it never ever happened. And your silence is just condoning the evil, wicked act of the perpetrator. These issues need to be addressed and not covered up or brushed under the carpet as they often are. And then it then goes on and says, from King David, the whole story, he heard the story and was enraged, but he didn't discipline Ammon. David doted on him because he was his firstborn. Absalom quit speaking to Ammon, not a word, whether good or bad, because he hated him for violating his sister. So now you've got a family in destruction, because there's no way 2 brothers can live harmoniously after one knows you have raped and pillaged his sister. And then the sister can't live harmoniously because she knows not one of the men in her family have her back. David, who's her father, we hear no word of compassion for his devastated daughter. Tamar remains desolate. Hey! She does not see truth brought to light or her abuser brought to account. Mournfully, there is no justice in this life for Tamar. The unresolved pathos of her story transcends millennia to startle us awake. If we long for a cathartic ending, we have abundant opportunities to begin writing one in our own churches and communities. The work of justice and healing is begging to be embraced. This has to stop. And I know I'm sounding like really passionate or whatever, but it just angers me. So hearing their voices, what victim support is out there, and especially at this time of COVID, there has been a rising increase of domestic violence. And many women, many men who are suffering in this, you want to die, but in reality, you just want to be saved. How can we do that for these people? So Pastor J. Alfred Smith Sr. frames the call to action poignantly. Who will pray with Tamar and stand by her side as she screams for justice? Do you remember that Tamar could be your daughter, your granddaughter, your sister, your niece, blood of your blood and bone of your bone? Tamar's story is rightly sacred. It speaks a truth we are reluctant to hear. Many of us in our churches don't want to be honest and speak the truth that there is evil, wicked perpetrators among us, and we just hide it and we pass it over, and it's creating damaged, broken people, where the church is supposed to be a safe haven for souls, not somewhere where you are broken. May our response to it and every Tamar we meet be holy and just. So, what are some of the common myths on domestic violence? A big myth is domestic violence only happens in poor families. Well, that's not true. Domestic violence occurs throughout all levels of society. There's no evidence that suggests that any income level, occupation, social class, or culture is immune from domestic violence. It doesn't matter if you're low income or you're a professional with a PhD, you can be a sufferer of domestic violence. And there's a HBO short series called Big Little Lies, which demonstrates this phenomenon. And it's a great example of how common abuse and violence are in many relationships that we have today. Then you have the second myth: domestic violence is always physical abuse. This is incorrect. Domestic abuse and intimate partner abuse do not always leave a bruise or a broken bone. In fact, the majority of clients that we see have experienced other types of abuse like financial, mental, emotional, sexual, coercion, harassment, stalking, polyvictimization, which is multiple types of abuse. And sometimes the emotional and financial abuse leaves a larger scar than the physical abuse. The feeling of another person controlling your life has a profound and lasting effect that wounds can take years to heal. Myth number 3, victims have the types of personalities that attract abusive partners and encourage abuse. This is categorically wrong. There is a form of victim, this is a form of victim blaming, and it's very common in our society. And so many studies have been determined that there is no standard set that a personality trait among victims of domestic violence will encourage and incur someone to do that. It is helpful to remind ourselves that the batterer is responsible for battering, not the victim. And we often turn the table back on the victim in abuse cases, especially assaults and sexual assaults, instead of rightfully placing the blame on the abuser. Remember, no one asks to be raped, beaten, or abused. Well, I hope not. I will say that. So let me say that because I have heard some weird stuff. So just quickly, let's just, hear from
intimate partner violence is defined as physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, and psychological aggression by a current or former intimate partner, and is preventable.
Intimate partner violence threatens the well-being of millions of people and their families every single day. Intimate partners may include current or former spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, dating partners, or sexual partners.
Intimate partner violence can occur between heterosexual or same-sex couples. Some victims may suffer just one experience, while others endure violence that lasts for years.
1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men have experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetime. And 1 in 10 high school students have experienced physical teen dating violence, which is a form of intimate partner violence.
Intimate partner violence consequences are widespread.
It impacts physical and mental health. It results in billions of dollars in medical, mental health, and lost work productivity costs.
But the good news is that intimate partner violence is preventable. We have strategies that can help you prevent this problem in your community. We can prevent intimate partner violence by teaching safe and healthy relationship skills, engaging influential adults, working to prevent violence starting in early childhood, creating protective environments, strengthening economic support for families, and supporting survivors to increase safety and lessen harms.
So there you just have some of the things that we are looking at today in domestic violence. And it's, you know, really, how can I put it? Domestic violence and intimate partner violence is so integral into our society today. And oftentimes it was often seen as the norm, and especially in the church setting, where many used to abuse scriptures that say things like, you know, the wife must submit to the husband. That was a woman submits to her husband when she feels safe, secure, and sound, that he has the love and the care and the tenderness to take care of her. She won't feel uncomfortable to submit to her husband. But it doesn't mean that you can now dominate them and abuse them and do as you want. And this is some of the misconflicting, how many people will use biblical language or wording to try and justify their mess. So oftentimes, many times people will say, why don't they leave? Well, it's very difficult to leave if you are under emotional, physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse. One of the things is many victims have such a mindset of shame, and that it's their fault. The truth is that most domestic violence situations are complicated by a number of factors. An abuser can use different fears as leverage in order to trap a survivor or limit their options. So, for example, a male client once spoke that he stayed with his abuser because he knew that it would make his kids safer. He said that if she was hitting him, then he knew she wouldn't be hitting the kids. That need to be close to his children and to have first-hand knowledge that they were safe was far more important than his own physical safety. And further complicating the matter, many male survivors perceive that they will struggle in court to prove that they are the victims of abuse and that they should retain sole custody of their children. So men very often never report the abuse. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and/or other abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner against another. It includes physical violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, and emotional abuse. The frequency and severity of domestic violence can vary dramatically, however. And the one consistent component of domestic violence is one partner's consistent efforts to maintain power and control over the other. Domestic violence is an epidemic affecting individuals in every community, regardless of our age, economic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, or nationality. It is often accompanied by emotionally abusive and controlling behavior that is only a fraction of a systematic pattern of dominance and control. Domestic violence can result in physical injury, psychological trauma, and in severe cases, even death. And the devastating physical, emotional, and psychological consequences of domestic violence can cross generations and last a lifetime. And that's that cycle that you see that children have witnessed and experienced the domestic violence and abuse, and they then can be a party to it or continue the pattern. It's a cycle, it's a curse. So where do we go from here? Well, in 1 Peter 3:7, It talks about relationships. And I'm all for equality and think that this text goes both ways, to husbands, wives, or partners. No one has a right to be privy to domestic violence. And in the same way, you husbands live with your wives in an understanding way, with great gentleness and tact, and with an intelligent regard for the marriage relationship, as with someone physically weaker, since she is a woman. Show her honor and respect as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered or ineffective. And of course, that also goes for the women to their husbands. And for same-sex relationships, you need to respect one another. And if for whatever reason you just cannot get along, it is always better to leave than to try and force your will and what you desire on the other. So there are many organizations out there to support you. Please don't feel you have to go through it or live this alone. Where do you start? Each situation is different, and the best thing you can do for help is to get an advocate, to listen and to support, offering counsel, but always remembering that abuse is a form of control, and empowering survivors means that they must make their own decisions. After all, they're the ones who have to live with the consequences. So with that in mind, one of the best things you can do for someone is to make sure that they don't have to navigate a complex, dangerous situation alone. Refer them to domestic violence hotlines such as TAPS or victim support. Abusers are often able to perpetrate their abuse because they isolate the victims. Public health directives on home isolation, especially at COVID-19 times, compound the danger for those living in abusive situations. And abusers may monitor their devices to ensure that what is going on inside the home is not shared. So the Paulette Senior, President and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation, said this new reality requires new methods of communication to help those facing gender-based violence. We know that internet and video calling are not readily accessible to some, and shelters and support services are doing everything they can to respond to a surge in violence. But if you need to signal for help, there is help, and please, we will, seek to contribute and make these efforts so you get help. So a new signal in today's society of how to signal for help. If you are in trouble, you have your hands like this, and you can make a quick video call. Just put it out there. This is what this will mean. The violence at home signal for help is you put your thumb in your hand, palm to camera, back your thumb, and then trap your thumb. That is it. So doing it again on the right hand. You have your palm to hand, you put in your thumb, you trap your thumb. That means that signal is now the signal, help, I am in danger. I'll do it one more time. Palm out, bum, trap your thumb. That means you are in danger. You don't need to say anything or do anything. That signal being sent out is what that means. And if for anyone who gets that signal, please act immediately. That is not a joke. And please, for those of you, it's not funny, don't use it as a joke. These are to help people in danger. And let's just pray. And, I want you to know, we also have domestic violence in the LGBT community, and we're also fighting for them. We stand against domestic violence. No one should experience domestic violence. And you need to be able to feel that you can go to your church leadership, your local authority, the police department, if you are in need. You should not feel like the victim over and over again. So let's pray about this. Father God, thank you so much for your love. Thank you for hearing and answering our prayers. Sometimes you don't act and we think you're not acting right away because it's something doesn't happen straight away. But God, you are there, you hear, and you provide resources and people that can support us, and advocates and lawyers and the medical professionals and the police departments. And there are negative people all over the world in every wake of life, but there are also gems, there are angels, and there are people that save lives. So please, dear Lord, let everyone under the sound of my voice today make a pact to stop the violence in any form and be supportive and caring and kind. And even if there's someone who has perpetrated the violence towards someone, let them find it in their heart to make amends and to end that today, and so that they do not harm another person's life. Please, dear Lord, take care of all. In your holy and most precious name, amen. So remember, you are not alone. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Nuggets Wellness Wednesday. And we need to find ways to stay connected with our community. No one should feel alone or without the information and support and help that they need. So if you need any information at all, please contact me. I can always signpost you to a support agency in your area. So once again, I just want to leave you with that signal. If you need support, the signal is thumb in, trap your thumb. Once again, hands out, thumb in, trap your thumb. That's all you need to do. Send that video message and someone will come to you. Thank you all. Yeah, there's a lot of dysfunctional family behavior in God's church. Yes, there is. And sadly, we need to stop it now. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to spending time with you again tomorrow. And tomorrow's topic, we will discuss grace. We need it. Have a blessed evening all. Goodbye.